And then we have the medulla. So we talked about the pons. The one thing about the pons that I didn't want to confuse you was this part right here, where it controls your respiration rate. It does have a part in it, but it really helps the medulla out. The medulla is the big guy that does it all, and the pons just sort of accessorizes it. Okay, so it can't do it on its own, but the medulla is the main one for your breathing. So let's go right to the medulla, because this is a big one. It is major. There's some major centers in the medulla that are super important, things like your cardiovascular and your respiratory centers. It is just below or past the pons. It has motor and sensory tracts that connect that spinal cord with the brain and the cerebellum above it. Cranial nerves, it has a branch of that vestibulocochlear, and the hypoglossal is the one that goes to the tongue. We are going to do all of the cranial nerves, so you will know that. You don't have to worry too much about where it came from. And then our functional regions. This is the most important part about the medulla, because it has two very important things in it: the cardiovascular center that controls your heart, and the respiratory center that controls your breathing. Two things we can't live without. It also does control swallowing, coughing, vomiting, hiccuping, and sneezing. All that's from that one little part. So because the medulla controls the heart rate, your cardiovascular center, and contains your respiratory center, when you hang a person, because we did this in AMP1, my favorite thing, with C1 and C2, and you snap the ligament, and that dent goes in and severs the spinal cord, and then that's supposed to cause instant death, right? It does that because it's right above, or the medulla is right above that level. And if you cut off the spinal cord right below the medulla, you've now cut off all innervation to the heart and your lungs, your breathing center. Okay, and that's how our nervous system works. Anytime you cut or lose a nerve or a level, everything below it is lost. Everything above it may still function, because the innervation comes from up here and goes down. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. That's what's cool about it. Okay. So that is your medulla. Please make sure you know that part about the cardiovascular and respiratory. And this is just some little summaries of those functions of the brainstem that we talked about. And now we can go into some more fun stuff. All right. I'm surprised I didn't just push through it and make you do that part. Yeah, because you guys did get pretty far. You are my furthest class, which worries me a little bit. It means you're not asking enough questions. I have a class I do on Monday, and they ask so many questions. We're so behind, but we're having a great time. We're having so much fun in there, but dang, are we behind? Okay.
Are you telling us the key to push the test back is to talk?
Yes, exactly, McKinley. They totally have learned that. They realized it. And I don't know if it's because they had me for AMP1. I'm not even sure I had any of them for AMP1, but they totally realized that, okay, the longer she talks, the longer it takes to finish this, we can keep pushing the test back. And I told them, I was like, there's going to be a point where I'm not going to be able to push back anymore, because I'm just going to have to start dropping units. And I don't want to have to do that. So I don't drop units. You guys want more?
That much better of a grade on their first test than the rest of the classes? Is that the key, or do they?
Do I get a better grade in the first test?
Did they actually do way better, their grades, or were they all kind of average?
No, they do pretty good. They do well. But that's what I'm saying is, the more I know that maybe some of you don't like it when I go off on tangents and talk about my dogs or whatever, but it keeps you awake. And when you're awake, whether you're talking or asking questions, you're actually paying attention. And so, yeah, it makes studying a lot easier, because you don't have to learn it all again. It's just refreshing what I've already talked about. So yes, the talking, the questions do help. They really do. And it slows me down too. I can get kind of fast and go into hyper mode. And if I do that, you end up, I skim over things and you may not hear it or whatever. So I do need somebody to control me speed-wise. I need like a pacemaker in the back wall that tells me like, slow down. I hated those things. I never knew how to use them. And I had to use them like my entire childhood. All right, so we are done with all of the little stuff. We kind of want to go into, I want to cover the cerebellum, and then we'll go into the cerebral cortex and some other stuff. And then the last thing we'll do is cranial nerves. And we're probably not going to get to cranial, we shouldn't get to cranial nerves today because there's plenty to do before we get there. But that will finish up the entire unit once we get to the cranial nerves. So there's not much more left. The test, I think, was originally scheduled for Tuesday, right? Or was it today? Supposed to be Tuesday. Okay, so the test will not be Tuesday. The test will probably be Thursday. Okay? Yes, yes. We'll do a Kahoot before it, and then put out the test on Thursday. All right, so let's go right into the cerebellum. By now, you've all seen the cerebellum in lab. You know that it's that lower posterior part of the brain. It does have two hemispheres. Oops. You'd think with all my technological difficulties that we wouldn't be so far ahead. Woohoo! What color y'all want? I'm just gonna stick with purple, with a deep red. Sorry. Do what, Erica? I'm sorry. They didn't fix it in my office. Okay, anyways, the cerebellum is two separate hemispheres. And you kind of knew that when we talked about the dura, and I told you that there's also, just like there's a falx cerebri separating the left and right hemispheres of the cerebrum, there is a falx cerebelli that separates the two hemispheres of the cerebellum. So it's really not, it's old news. You should know that. Even though we didn't see it in lab because those brains did not have a falx cerebellum. And then the middle part is called the vermis. That vermis is actually that little part that was peeking out of that tentorium before you cut it. It was the one part that's exposed. It's okay. This is all just not details you need to know. What does the cerebellum do? What does this little accessory that sits under our brains do for us? Well, it actually has the job of coordinating our muscle movement and contraction. It maintains our muscle tone, our posture, and our balance. So it's because of the cerebellum that I can pick up this pencil nice and smoothly, right? And then place it back down again without any hiccups. If I had a problem with my cerebellum or I had a lesion in the cerebellum, my movements would not be so coordinated. My muscles would not all work in the same way. They may work opposite each other and you end up with jerky movements like this. So I'd be trying to get this pencil, but my arm would be doing all sorts of things, right? Until I get to it. We call that ataxia. Oh, and I have it right here. No. Parkinson's? No, so there is a part, I may have mentioned it a little bit, substantia nigra. Did we talk about that? Barely, we just skimmed over it, yeah. So substantia nigra is a part of the brain that secretes dopamine. And it's that lack of dopamine that causes Parkinson's. Yes, it does. It means black. Yes, exactly. Because it's very pigmented and dark. And I don't know if we talked about it. Don't make me talk about it, because if I talk about it, I'm going to put Parkinson's on the test. I'm just saying. So. Because it is cool to know. Okay, so that is ataxia. Cerebellar ataxia, or just ataxia, is usually caused by some sort of lesion or malfunction in the cerebellum, because that's its job, is to coordinate smooth muscle movements. Yes. Contractures. Give me an example. No. Yeah. No, that would be more motor. Yeah. No, the cerebellum really just kind of does, because, I mean, if you think about the location of the cerebellum, it's at the base of the skull, right? And it connects that spinal cord and the cerebral hemispheres. It's sort of just kind of make sure everything goes where it's supposed to go when it's supposed to go. Meaning if I'm flexing a muscle, it makes sure that everybody's, you know, relaxing when they're supposed to relax. If I'm doing a movement that requires several muscles, it makes sure that all those muscles are synchronized so it looks very graceful and nice. If I'm walking, it makes sure that I can walk properly, you know, using the right muscles as opposed to fighting against each other. Okay, so it's more of a like delegator or coordinator. It is a coordinator. Okay, it does also bring our muscle tone, keeps our muscle tone, our normal muscle tone, especially the ones that are in our core that help us keep our posture, keep our body upright, and balance. Okay, now you've got me thinking about what causes this. May have to look into that. I would think this would be a lesion that's a little higher up though. Okay, and that is the cerebellum. Any questions on the cerebellum? No? Cool, let's talk about the diencephalon. What the heck is a diencephalon? It's something we've already talked about in lab, but you don't know it by that name. So, y'all ready? The diencephalon is made up of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. What? Okay, the thalamus. We did this in lab, so this should be familiar, right? Okay. Looking at this picture right here, here is your cerebral hemisphere. There's that corpus callosum. Look right here, there is your thalamus. And I told you at the time, the area below the thalamus was your hypothalamus, and then your epithalamus is up top. Okay, so the thalamus actually takes in all of your sensory input, with the exception of smell. It also has to do with your memory and emotions. Cool. The hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is going to actually be a huge, major player in maintaining homeostasis, and it does that by controlling our autonomic nervous system and also controlling the pituitary. The pituitary happens to be your master endocrine gland. So it means that when we talk about the endocrine system, we will talk about the pituitary and how the pituitary is the master of all things endocrine. It tells every part of your endocrine system what to do. Okay? But the hypothalamus is the boss of the pituitary. Cool. That means that little tiny spot that we saw below that intermediate mass in between the optic and the mammillary bodies was actually a really big deal. And then the epithalamus really just has that pineal gland up top there. What does it do? We're going to learn that it's going to secrete melatonin, some yummy, yummy stuff that helps us go to sleep. So let's talk about these details. Here's your thalamus. It's got several nuclei, and then you have to say, well, what is a nucleus? Like a cell nucleus? No, a nucleus is simply a mass of gray matter. A nucleus can be a mass of gray matter or white matter, but we're going to see nuclei in gray matter. So a mass of gray matter, just a clump of gray matter, and also the intermediate mass. This is the intermediate mass right here. Notice they called it, sorry, this is it right there. They called it the interthalamic adhesion. That means the same thing as intermediate mass, okay? So I've got some nuclei and I have an intermediate mass. The intermediate mass is the part that connects the left and right sides of the thalamus, because just like you had a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere, a right part to the cerebellum, a left part, the thalamus is also divided left and right, and the intermediate mass sits in the middle, connecting both sides. Okay? Cool. Yes, I do talk too fast. Okay. All right. Okay. What is the purpose of the thalamus? What does it do? In this picture, you can actually see all these different colors are different nuclei that you're looking at. You don't have to know their names or anything. Just understand that they're there. And then if you notice, look, this is that intermediate mass right here in the middle. This is one side of that thalamus, and this is the other side. Does this make sense? Okay, looks like something familiar, but I don't know what it is. The thalamus is the relay station for all sensory impulses except smell, obviously. That means that any sensation coming up through those sensory tracts in that white matter in your spinal cord will have to pass by here by the thalamus, so the thalamus can decide where it needs to go. Okay. Oh, you're something that we are feeling in our foot. You need to go over to your, post central gyrus. Oh, you're here because we're feeling wet. Go over to that area. Okay, that's what the thalamus does. Any questions on the thalamus? Okay, yeah, you guys don't ask enough questions. Yes, yeah. Oh, which one does smell? Smell's not actually, when we do the cortex, you'll see where the smell area is. It's actually in the cortex. It's not through the thalamus. I get the question now. All right, the hypothalamus. What does the hypothalamus do? The major regulator of homeostasis by controlling the autonomic nervous system. It also produces hormones. It controls the pituitary gland. Okay, so what does that mean? Everything. Well, our emotions, our behavioral patterns, our eating, our drinking, our body temperature, our circadian rhythms. All of that is controlled by the hypothalamus. Okay, so it can control my autonomic nervous system by secreting hormones. It can control my pituitary. That in turn is going to control a lot of things that happen in our body. Our emotions, behaviors, our eating and drinking. Are we hungry? Do we want to eat more? Do we want to drink more? Our body temperature and circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms, what are they? Yeah, you can't just throw stuff at me and not tell me what it is, lady. Okay, so we have circadian rhythms are sort of like internal clocks. We have internal clocks in our bodies that automatically disperse hormones and different levels of things depending on where you are in this cycle. For example, when the sun goes down and it begins to get dark, that pineal gland will begin to secrete melatonin so that it calms your body and gets ready to sleep. When it's time to wake up, your reticular activating system will begin to activate so that you begin to become alert and woken up. That's one of your circadian rhythms. So there's a lot of things that change between times of the day depending on where you are in that rhythm. You'll find that there are times where your breathing rate is slower, your heart rate is slower, and maybe other times where it's faster, and it happens in a cycle. So it's at the same time each time. So circadian rhythms are why they tell you, how long did they say it takes to break a habit or like to change your sleeping cycle? Let's say I decide that, okay, I normally wake up at 6. I want to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day instead of 6. Okay, I can't just set my alarm to 4 o'clock and wake up the next day at 4 and be okay. It's not going to happen. And it's not because, I'm a bad person or a heavy drinker or a partier. No, it's because I have a circadian rhythm that's already, my biological clock is set to 6 a.m. And in order to reset it or change it, it takes time. There is actually a calculation. I wish I could remember it, but I don't remember things. And you'll learn why I don't remember things very soon. Is it like, I think it's something like 1 week for every hour. Do you know? Does anybody know? I used to know. I don't know anymore. But there is, they've actually tried to calculate it, but it does take time. And the reason it takes time for you to get to the point where you can now wake up at 4 a.m. and still feel the same way you did at 6 is because of that circadian rhythm, because your body is in auto mode most of the time. And so when you change things, it takes time for those rhythms to get into sync with what you're trying to change, right? Like I just saw an ad on Facebook. I get the weirdest Facebook ads, but I just saw an ad on Facebook about some kind of, what are those things called? Not shakes, the drinks you drink in the morning instead of food. Smoothies or I think it was smoothie, yeah. It was some kind of pre-packaged smoothie ad. And it said something like, it takes 69 days to develop a habit, right? And they have like 69 packets of smoothies or something. I don't know. I didn't care about the smoothies, but I thought it was interesting that they narrowed it down to 69 days to develop a habit. But it's based on the same idea that you have to consistently keep doing something in order to change your biological rhythms, your circadian rhythms, those things that are already in place, right? And that's why we can't just all of a sudden decide we want to wake up at 4 a.m. every day. It's also why people who work night shifts have a really hard time in the beginning, because our bodies are naturally made to sleep in the dark and wake up in the daytime. And when we reverse that, that's really hard on the body. So it takes a long time. There you go, speaking from experience. It takes a long time to be okay with that. And you may never be okay with that because it's completely against everything that our biology does. Okay. It can make you severely depressed. There's so much stuff that happens at night that's meant to happen while we're sleeping. That's the time that our body repairs and refreshes everything. If you lack sleep, sleep deprivation, or you reverse your sleep cycle and sleep during the day and are awake at night, most of those functions are wiped out. Things like memory, even your happiness, it can make you severely depressed. Sleep deprivation is one of the quickest ways to make a person insane. I'm telling you right now, for real. It is bad. And it is clinically documented. I mean, they've done sleep studies. So that's how important it is to sleep and sleep at night. And I keep telling my damn kids, they're up 2 a.m. playing on the Xbox, that this is not okay. There's a reason you wake up with dark circles and bloodshot eyes, because your body didn't get the time that it needed at night. Even if you sleep until 2 p.m., it's not the right time, because your circadian rhythm, that was supposed to kick in, hours ago. So trying to make that sleep up in the daytime really doesn't do you any good. It's not as good as it was had you done it during nighttime when your body's supposed to be resting because of that circadian rhythm. Okay, anyways, that's the hypothalamus, super cool. I don't expect you guys to know all of the nuclei in the thalamus or the hypothalamus, but I do want you to know the function of it because I think that is important, okay? So your thalamus is your relay station for all sensations, all sensory coming into the cerebrum. And the hypothalamus is your major regulator by controlling autonomic system and the pituitary gland. It also controls your circadian rhythms. And when I say circadian rhythms, that should mean, oh, okay, that's like body temperature, eating, drinking, emotional. All right. The epithalamus, the only good thing about the epithalamus, well, not the only good thing, but the most important thing about it, the epithalamus is the pineal or pineal gland. I don't care how you say it as long as you can spell it. Secretes melatonin. By now, everybody knows what melatonin is, right? Yes, because we've all gone to Walmart and picked up a big ass bottle of melatonin and we're popping it every night like candy. Just saying. Okay, so that's one of those things that's supposed to happen naturally. Your pineal gland towards the nighttime will begin secreting melatonin excessively so that you can relax and go into sleep. Okay, and then there's your smell. Who was asking about smell? Okay, there you go. You've got a little bit of smell here with your epithalamus. All right, and then we've got our breakdowns here, our summaries of all the functions. You can read through those if you want. There's your thalamus, your hypothalamus, and your epithalamus. Okay? Yes? Cool. All right. I'm going to pause here for some dramatic effect before we go into the cerebrum. I like the cerebrum. I mean, we keep going at this rate, we'll be able to test on Tuesday. Huh? Yes, we're going to look at them. All right, let's talk about the cerebrum. Okay, so we've got the cortex, which is your outer layer of the cerebrum. That is gray matter. And then we've got lots of gyri and fissures and sulci in that gray matter, your outer parts of the cerebral hemispheres. And then on the inside, we have the white matter. The white matter is going to have all of those tracks. Remember, the sand dollar had the tracks in it. Those tracks will continue up into the white matter of your brain also. And they will be that connection between the brain and the spinal cord. Do you guys remember this stuff when we talked about the tracts? Yes, okay. So I've got tracks that are coming up through the white matter of the spinal cord going to the inner parts, the white matter in my cerebral hemispheres. And then I have gray matter on the outside of my hemispheres. And those are the ones that will have different gyruses and sulci. And that's the one that that's the cortex that we're going to talk about the different areas and what they do. Okay. And then there are tracks within this white matter that actually connect either side. We're actually going to take them in detail. Either side of the hemispheres, like going from left to right, such as the corpus callosum, which we've talked about in lab. And we're going to talk about again later on today. Okay. All right. So here's a look at the cerebral cortex. Notice that when we're talking, excuse me, all of this is all white matter. So I'm shading in the white matter because I want you to differentiate between the white matter and the cortex. The cortex is just this stuff right here. It's this skinny layer here on the outside. Okay? What's so funny? Did I draw it funny? Oh, just your face. Okay. So here we're looking at the brain from up top. You've got two hemispheres, right? And each hemisphere has lobes. And then it has some certain sulci that we're going to look at, some important ones, and several gyri. In particular, we're actually going to look at the central sulcus, but I want to do the lobes first. So if I divide this cerebrum into lobes, and they're really actually named after the bones that lie over them, okay? So the frontal lobe is going to be directly below that frontal bone. Yeah, this is flashback to ANP1, I'm sorry. The parietal lobe is going to be right where the parietal bone is, okay? The temporal lobe is going to be right across from the temporal bone. And then the occipital lobe will be in the back towards the occipital bone, okay? Those are the lobes of the cerebral hemispheres. There is another lobe that some people will mention, some people will never mention. I chose to leave it out because I'd rather keep it simple. But there is an insula that is deep on the inside here. And we're really not going to worry about it, but I'm just telling you in case, you know, you read it in the book or something, you're like, why'd you skip a lobe? Because that's why, because I can. Okay. Why'd you skip a lobe? Okay, so not only do we have anatomically all of these lobes that, you know, frontal, temporal, parietal, occipital, we also have it divided into functional areas, meaning this outer cortex of our cerebrum, every single part of it has some sort of function. And we have tried to map it all out. I know your eyes just all got really, really big right now, really big. Because I don't know, for some reason, it feels like you think I'm going to pop this picture up on a test and ask you to label it all, right? Would I do that to you? Not when you bring me Duncan, no. Maybe. No, I'm not going to do that to you, but guess what? There are some that are very important that we actually will learn. Not all of them, but we are. Do what? Yeah. Yeah. There's a few that we are going to talk about, okay? So before we do that, let's define where we're at. Okay, there is a very large sulcus right here. Maybe red's not the best color because that's already red. Do highlighter and yellow, green, yellow. Let's do yellow, make it bright. There is a sulcus. What is a sulcus? A groove. Y'all better know that. Right here, that separates that frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. Okay, that's this right there. That is called the central sulcus. I highlighted it. Okay, so the central sulcus separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. Oh, no, it would have been super close though, because this is it right here. So this was just showing you, hey, we took a chunk out of this parietal lobe and this is what it looks like. Yeah. Yeah. But this would be it right here. So you have your frontal lobe right here and then your parietal lobe here. There is a sulcus that separates the two lobes, and we're going to focus on that central sulcus because it has two very important areas in front of it and behind it. Yeah, so that's your central sulcus. Now, in front of the central sulcus is our primary motor area. We call that the precentral gyrus. Notice these gyri are named after the central sulcus. So the precentral gyrus is in front of the central sulcus. It's part of the frontal lobe. Behind the central sulcus is the post-central sulcus, and that is where you will find your primary somatosensory area. Okay, so that one central sulcus has a gyrus in front of it and a gyrus behind it. The gyrus in front of it, the precentral gyrus, it's huge. It's your primary motor area, okay? So if somebody really pisses you off and you want to screw up their legs or make them paralyzed or never walk again, get into that brain, find the precentral sulcus and cut it out. I know, I'm sorry. No, it's really funny because last night, I think it was, no, I think it was in lecture, maybe. It's either lecture or lab. Yeah, I guess it was in lecture because we were sitting here and I was talking about cutting off the spinal cord with hanging someone with, you know, the dents and the axis. And I was like, remember, you know, I did this in AMP1 in lab. And this girl looks at me and she said, your lab must be really scary. And I was like, no, it's interesting because don't you want to know, like, most people think when you hang someone, the idea is to cut off like oxygen. And it's not. The idea is to break that ligament so that dents cuts off the spinal cord. That's the only way to get a quick death because you're trying to suffocate them. That's going to take time. So anyways, so yes, the primary motor area is in this precentral gyrus. The primary sensory area or somatosensory is in the post-central gyrus. Those are important areas, okay? There's some more important ones we're gonna talk about. And not all of them are on this picture, but let's see. What are we gonna talk about? Your auditory area, your primary auditory area. Look at that, right there. That's your temporal lobe. Your Broca's speech, right there. Wernicke's we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about visual areas. Obviously, visual areas will be in the occipital lobe. A lot of these will make sense. Things like, okay, occipital will be your eyes, right? Temporal or anywhere near here is going to have to do with your hearing, right? So a lot of them do make sense. And we're going to break them down. Okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, how did she get kicked out? She was here. She was just talking. Okay. So I couldn't fit the picture and the words on one thing, so I chose to separate them, and that's okay because you can go back and look at the picture and compare if you want. Okay, our sensory areas. Primary somatosensory. Where is this? Post-central gyrus, right behind that central sulcus. Visual is going to be your occipital lobe. Auditory and olfactory. Auditory is hearing. Olfactory is, I feel like I need to write this down for some reason. Visual is seeing. Auditory is, auditory is hearing. Olfactory is smelling. And those all happen in the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe. We also have Wernicke's area in that temporal lobe. Okay. Visual, sensory. Okay, we got that. These are all or some of the sensory areas. These are the ones that I want you to know. The motor areas. Okay, things that make things move. The primary motor is in that precentral gyrus, right in front of the central sulcus. Your speech, Broca's speech area, that's actually part of the frontal lobe. Okay. And then we have association areas. And what I want to say about association areas is most of these areas, like if here it says visual, this is visual, sensory, and association. Okay. This is auditory, sensory, and association. Olfactory, sensory, and association. What does association mean? We talked about this kind of in the beginning when we were like just introducing the idea of how our brain works. Okay, so these sensory areas not only take in that sensory impulse coming from a sensory neuron, they also have the ability to associate. When we associate things, it is when you send that information to other areas, okay? Because we talked about how everything is tied in with everything else, right? You can't smell without seeing, or you can't taste without smelling. Everything is tied into somewhat. Every sensation you have is going to be associated in some way, because if you're not going to use that sensation to help hear or see or taste, you're going to use it to remember, or you're going to use it to form a picture in your head or a memory. Okay, there's going to be something that it has to be associated with. So the association areas, they're all tied in with these sensory areas. Okay, cool. And then we have motor areas, which actually will be the ones that have those motor neurons that go down and do the motor stuff. Are we okay with this? Okay. Well, I want to go back to this picture real quick. So now, if you printed these out, you can put, the words next to the image, and then go back and look and say, okay, so I know that my motor areas, my primary motor is my precentral gyrus. I know that Broca's speech is right over there. I know that my sensory areas will be things like Wernicke's, my visual, my auditory, auditory's there too. Somatosensory, major one in my post-central gyrus, okay? Of all of these, do I expect you to memorize them all? No, but I do want you to know what's on this page, okay? Exactly. So, like, what Wernicke's area does, it takes speech or language, and turns it into thought. Broca's area, or Broca's speech area, does the opposite. Takes your thoughts and forms audible words with it. It's what coordinates the movement of your mouth and everything to make those words. Yes. And then Wernicke's is more of understanding and processing the speech that you're hearing. Because this one is, this is sensory. Okay, so everything sensory-wise that has to do with talking or language or, you know, hearing words, that's sensory. And this one is going to be motor. How do we form those words with our mouth? And because we have two different areas, we have so many different areas in our brain that do so many different things. That's why you can take a patient that has a stroke, loses the ability to talk, but then teach them how to sing, and then they can slowly reteach a different area of the brain, like the singing area, how to talk, right? Because, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I did want to mention this when I go back to this one here. Yes, we have areas identified and labeled, but there's no clean line saying only this area is going to be Broca's speech. No, sometimes those areas can grow. They'll go into different lobes. They'll actually get bigger. They can develop. And so nothing is so clearly defined as saying, okay, I've got, you know, 3 centimeters to the left, and then go, you know, it's not like a survey that you could like map out. No, there's some variation in there. Yeah. Yeah, we do that all the time. All the time. That's why like tumors are so dangerous, because when you have a tumor that's growing, most invasive tumors can cause all of your blood vessels and capillaries to increase and give it more blood supply because it needs more blood supply. But that's the ability of our body to adapt. So yeah, these areas, they are there. Yes, we've identified them. Does it mean that they can't get bigger or smaller or move a little bit over or have a different, you know, have a neighbor help them out? No, they can. It's not as clearly defined as we think it is. At least not these parts. Okay, so these are the sensory and motor areas that I want you to know. And then this is some super cool stuff right here. Okay, so here we are talking about that precentral and postcentral gyrus. Remember those? Which one was motor? The precentral gyrus, right. So this is the motor area right here. I'm going to go ahead and add that this is the precentral gyrus. And this is my sensory over here. So that is my postcentral gyrus. You know, they had to have had, did I spell it right? Yeah. They had to have had some really, really, how do I say this? Some really ethically debatable testing done in order to come up with this map. Just saying. Do what? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's actually really, really super cool. Because look, okay, so this would be the central gyrus right here, okay? So you're going from the middle over. So that means that they've mapped this out to know where all of these sensations are being processed. Sorry, motor, where all of these motor impulses are coming from. So that means that if I cut out this area here of somebody's precentral gyrus, they should lose all facial expressions. Can't move the facial muscles. I know, right? Super cool. Look at the postcentral. This is all my sensory. So if I cut out this part of somebody's gyrus, they're not going to feel any sensations coming from the muscles or skin of their neck. Also very cool, right? So we don't give you this map to learn how to hurt people and cut things out of their brain. That's not the point. The point is to understand that you can actually begin to question whether there's a lesion or there's an infarction, some type of stroke or something that happened in different parts of the brain simply by knowing what that part covers. Plus, I think this is super cool. That's why I included it. I think this is one of the things that's not in your textbook, but I added it here because I think you should get a look at it. Not because I'm going to test you on it at all. This is not one of those, but it's because I think it's really neat to know that, you know, all of these different areas are all on this one primary motor area in that precentral gyrus. And then next time, you know, you have a friend or somebody that gets into an accident and has a brain bleed, you can be like, what part of the brain is it, or where is it at? And you can predict what type of symptoms they're going to have depending on where that bleed is. You know, is it in the occipital lobe? Oh, he's probably not going to be able to see for a while until it heals. Is it prefrontal? Personality is going to be totally fucked up. But you know what I mean? Okay. Moving on. Okay, so primary motor. It's just cool stuff. Primary motor will be controlling your voluntary muscle contractions. Primary somatosensory receives all the sensory from the muscles and the skin. Man, I don't know. I don't think I can get fired. Sorry. I don't care. Okay. We're just going way too fast. Well, we have like 15 minutes left, right? Okay. Yeah, the prefrontal. This is why I pay attention to foreheads, y'all, because the prefrontal area is personality. I know, right? I know, and I'm like, people with big foreheads, I don't know. What does it mean? Maybe people with big foreheads have better personalities. Okay, so we've kind of figured out, okay, so we know, you know, that the cortex has different areas of motor and sensory areas. We know that the on the inside, all of that is those white tracts that have come in from the spinal cord or are going down to the spinal cord, right? There are also different types of tracts on the inside of these cerebral hemispheres, okay? And we have classified them depending on what they do. There are commissural tracts. A commissural tract is a tract that connects the left and right sides to each other, okay? Commissural tracts connect left and right sides to each other. We've already seen one major commissural tract, that is the commissural tract is the corpus callosum that connects your left and right hemispheres to each other. There are also association tracts, and association tracts will be traveling within the cerebrum, but different parts. That's the part that connects your hearing with your vision, or your smell with your taste. They're all over the place. Okay, so association tracts are the tracts that we use to associate inside within the hemispheres. And then there are projection tracts, and projection tracts, just like the name says, they're the ones that are going to take those sensations up through that, you know, white part of the spinal cord to your brain, or take them down. They're the ones that project these impulses either to the brain or from the brain to the spinal cord. Okay. Are we clear on these? A commissural tract, association tract, and projection tract. Yes? Okay. It's way further than I wanted to get today. Stop and walk out. I know, right? No, we're not going to do that. All right, so we're just going to touch on There's a few different things, other systems that are part of our cerebral hemispheres that just are worth mentioning briefly. Things like the basal nuclei. And so these are nuclei. By the way, if you ever see the word basal ganglia, that is an old term used for basal nuclei, okay? They're not actually ganglia, they're basal nuclei. So those are masses of that gray matter that you find in the hemisphere. What do? Well, the basal nuclei will actually help to regulate and coordinate body movements, and they're also involved with our cognitive functions such as attention, memory, and planning. Attention, memory, and planning. Okay. Do what? No, it's actually, look, so these are actually really central. They're centralized. These are them in purple and red and pink. You see them? Yeah. Okay. So, and they're all parts. So when I look at this and I think, okay, the basal nuclei coordinate body movements, attention, memory, and planning. Y'all, I swear to you, I'm one of those people that like, when I was in school, I would self-diagnose all the time, okay? Yeah, but this is one that just occurred to me recently. I had never thought of it before, but I think about me and I think about memory, planning, what was the other one? Attention, memory, and planning, and I'm like, shoot, something's wrong with my basal nuclei. I ain't got none of that. Can't plan. I can't even plan dinner. I can't remember anything at all, not recent or old, huh? Yeah, no, people have things planned. I know people that have planned their vacations a year in advance. I don't even know what I'm doing in an hour, much less know what I'm doing for spring break or what I'm doing for summer vacation. I have no clue. I don't. I really don't. And people that don't know me, I don't even remember it. I just read it off the slide. Yeah, I just read it off of there. I don't really know it. I don't remember that. Yeah, no, it's bad. It's really bad. We all know I have severe attention deficits. Yeah, can't plan, can't remember a thing. So I'm seriously thinking something's up with my basal nuclei. Maybe need to have that checked out. I don't know. Do you? Yeah, I don't know. And people are offended when they first meet me. They don't understand that that really is just how I am, and it's not, you shouldn't take it personal. Yes, I am the person that will totally walk right by my own child in a restaurant and go sit down and not even realize that that was my child that I walked by. I do it all the time. I did it to Sarah like a week ago. I do it all the time. All the time. My kids will call me angry. Mom, did you seriously not just see me? And I'm like, no, where were you? And they're like, we were right next to you. And they were right next to me at a light, honking and waving. I didn't even hear him honk. I didn't notice a thing. I'm always in the zone, apparently. I think it's because I focus so much on like my path of walking that I don't see anything else. I have no clue what's around me. All the time. All the time. Yeah. So. And see, and that's probably one of the symptoms of sleep deprivation. Yeah. Yeah, that must be one of the. So anyways, yes, I do believe my basal nuclei are messed up because I have none of those functions at all. No attention, no memory, no planning, no coordinated movements, none of it. Don't do it. No, I really don't. Well, it's different when you've Do you know when I graduated from college? Like, do you know how long it's been? It's different when you're doing the same thing, you know, like for 25, 30 years. That's different. I mean, I guess if like, you see your kids every day, so I remember my kids, but if I don't see it every day, I'm not going to remember it. I'm not. My kids have memories from when they were like 5 and 6 that they will talk to me about, and I have no clue what they're talking about. And I am totally floored at how can they remember these things. I don't know what. I mean, they'll even bring things up like last year. Hey, Mom, remember last year when we did this? I'm like, what? And they're like, you don't remember, do you? They definitely didn't get my genes with the memory. I don't know. One of them I kind of question. But, yeah, I can't. Can I tell you a secret? It's not really a secret. It's not a secret because my office neighbor laughs at me all the time. Y'all, I have to check my schedule every time I come in the morning. And then after every class, I go back and look and see what's next. And then there are times where like I'll be in my office and I get a text from a student of, oh, when's your next lab? And I'll be like, hold on, I'll go outside, look at I don't have my schedule memorized. I have a picture of it. I always take a picture in the beginning of the semester, but now so much time has gone by that I'm having to scroll through months. And I'm like, forget it. It's easier to get up and look at the door. I had a printout of it on my desk. I don't know where it went. Can't find it. And I haven't had time to go make another one. So no, it is bad. And I've actually, like, I've looked into this. I can't find nothing. I used to think I had a tumor or something going on. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just like that. I don't know. But I did read a study a couple of weeks ago that loss of memory is actually a sign of high intelligence. I told you guys that, didn't I? Or did I tell my other class? Yes. So they did a study recently on memory in correlation to intelligence. And they found that people who forget things easily, you know, regular things like what did I eat for breakfast? What did I do for this? People who forget things quickly or often are found to be highly intelligent. And the reason they forget those things is because they are constantly adding more knowledge. And so to make room for this knowledge that you're putting in all the time, you lose the insignificant stuff, like what I ate or where I went for vacation or whatever. So that's going to be my excuse from now on. That's what I'm going to say. It's true. It is a study. They did do a study on it, and it is legit. Yes, absolutely. Bad handwriting, too. Are we time? Okay, good. We did it. Yeah, because the limbic system is kind of cool. We're going to talk about that. Should we just do it now? Sure, we'll do it. And then we'll talk about it again on Tuesday. But we are going to finish up on Tuesday. That means that Thursday will be the test. Okay? Sorry. Anyways, the limbic system is this part. Notice that when we talk about things like basal nuclei, get with the times, man, or limbic system, and later on we're going to talk about the reticular activating system. These are things that aren't necessarily confined to one lobe, okay? They're all over. That's why the nuclei, you'll find them in different lobes. The limbic system, you'll find it parts of different lobes, because these are all things that connect things together. And what the limbic system does, it's actually called the emotional brain, which is super awesome, because just like I have a problem with my basal nuclei, some of you may have a problem with your limbic system. The limbic system plays a primary role in our emotions, pain, pleasure, affection, and anger. Okay? So the next time you meet someone who cries at every commercial, you know that they have a highly sensitive limbic system. Or someone who's overly affectionate or not affectionate at all, or feels pain really easily or doesn't feel pain at all those have to do with that limbic system. Okay. All right, so we are going to stop there. I do expect you to know the limbic system and the basal nuclei, just what they do.